Shalom, shalom. I'm going to start off this video by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles and the bishops of Great Millstone that rule well, that teach well, while learning the truth 100% according to the Bible. And I also want to say shalom to the elect, the 144,000 men, prophets, servants scattered abroad the four corners of the earth. And shalom to the Akwaf, which are the sisters that are sincere and your children. Shalom. And in today's video is going to be basically a part 2 into that dream that I had. You brothers and sisters that may have been following or may not have seen it, but I made a part 1 of a dream basically talking about Revelation 12 and 12, how Esau was going to come down with great wrath, which he is, Salakia, according to the Bible. And the Lord gave me a quick vision of basically this devil, kicking in men of the Lord's houses and things of that nature, persecuting the saints, the men of the Lord. So this is part 2, basically, to that same video the Lord gave me yesterday night. I had a dream, basically, and the Lord, the Spirit allow you to know what you're dreaming of, and I knew that in that time that it was a vision of part 2 of basically what I dreamed about probably a week or two previous, right? So the Lord gave it to me again, and I'm going to get this precept real quick before I start seeing the dream. So bear with me. Man. Shall. Right? Bear with me. All right, this is Acts chapter 2, verse 17 in the KJV, and it says, "And it shall come to pass in the last days," right? Saith Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, "I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." So this is the precept that the Lord allowed to come to my mind yesterday when I had the dream. Salakia, yesterday night when I woke up from the dream and I was, pondering on it, thinking about it, of course. And the Lord allowed that precept to come in my mind, basically saying that, these are the times, the times of the signs of the times. Basically, we know that we're coming into a time of Jacob trouble and civil unrest and all of these things, the MOTB and all of these things. But in this particular dream that I had, basically, it was a part 2 from, so how the first dream started off, I'm going to tell it to the best of my knowledge, what I remembered. Basically, I said I was in here asleep, and by me being in here asleep, I was laying down, and then obviously I just heard like a barricade at the door, something just beating at the door, and then, like I said, this was a dream, but, I'm feeling like something beating on the door and things of that nature. Then, I'm asleep. But of course, when I started hearing the beating, it woke me up out of my sleep. Then I seen the Esau Edom, the so-called white man. And I guess it was the military, or could have been some troops, or it could have been police force. I don't know who it was, but it was some type of law enforcement. Could have been the National Guard, the military, but the Lord allowed it to. In my dream, I felt like it was the police, it could have been the police were wearing SWAT team uniforms and things of that nature. Or it could have been the military. I'm not sure. But I know they busted in my house or in my home while I was asleep, and they came like around 3, 4-ish in the morning. They came at a time when you least expected them to come. They didn't come like early in the morning because it would have been too obvious. You would have been seeing them come. So around this time that they was doing the blitz or going into men's houses and things of that nature, the men of the Lord persecuting them is going to be at a time where it's going to be late at night. You're not going to be expecting it. As the Lord have said, suddenly shall, 1 Thessalonians 5 and 3, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction, right? Which means when Esau comes down with that great wrath and he's going to persecute the men of the Lord, we're not going to know when it's going to come. It's going to come suddenly. And that's what I felt in that dream when they busted my door. It happened suddenly. I wasn't expecting it. I was in here sleeping, and I woke up, man. So that was basically what happened in the first part of the dream. Then before they was able to touch me, the Lord allowed the vision to end. But the dream going into what I had basically last night that correlates with that dream was I was basically the Lord allowed me to know in the spirit where I was, right? But I was at a FEMA camp, and the reason I knew I was at a FEMA camp because I could tell by how everybody in there was, it's like we was all, I don't know, it's crazy to say what it was that they had us in, but it's almost like, most people believe in these FEMA, and I'm not saying this is how it's going to be because I don't know. I haven't been there yet. Lord's will, I don't go to those FEMA camps, but I mean, hey, we know that certain brothers and sisters are going to be in these camps, man. Thus saith the Lord, thus said the Bible. Some of us are going to get put into these concentration camps. So I had the dream of, me being in a concentration camp. And the reason I knew it was a concentration camp, because like I said, they had us all in there. We had on certain clothes, and I'm not too fond or remember of what clothes it was we was having, but I knew we didn't have on the clothes that it was that we came in there with. So it's like almost like, when you go to prison, to brothers that may have known someone that been to prison or somebody that been incarcerated. It's like when you come in there, you know how they'll make you strip, change, put on you a uniform and send you to a room. It was kind of that same setup. So it's almost like you was in prison. That's why the Lord said they shall, Revelation 2:10, and I'm going to get that precept, Lord's will. But the Lord said that the devil shall cast some of you into prison. And those prisons are going to be those FEMA camps, but it was set up like a modern day prison. They basically made you come in there, put on a certain outfit that they saw fit for you to wear. Like I said, it was almost like a, set up like a jail. And then obviously I could tell that in that time that they was in it, they was killing people. Of course, like I felt that in the spirit that, it's almost like they had you wearing, how could I say it? Because from what I remembered in the dream, it's almost like they had us wearing, I'm not sure, I don't want to say the wrong color, but from what I remember, they basically had everybody separated, like they had the women on one side, the men and the women couldn't be in contact with one another. That's what I knew from the dream. It was almost like they had it in order the way it was set up in the FEMA camps. They had it set up in particular, like I guess they had the women on their side, almost like you would be inside of a prison, like I said again, the men were all on one side. It doesn't matter if you was a tranny, a mole, or any of those things. If you were considered a man or if you were born a male, they're going to put you on the side with the men. And that's what I seen, because in the dream I seen it was moles around. It was all types of different people, but they were all men. We're all men at the end of the day, despite what people might try to do to themselves. The Lord created men and women, only two genders. So that's what I seen. All the men were segregated on one part in their, cells or whatever the case may be. And like I said, we weren't in cells, because it's crazy. Because guess what? Though we know we were in the FEMA camps, or I knew in the spirit that I was in the FEMA camp, they didn't have us. And like I said, it was set up like a jail. But we weren't like in cells or nothing like that. You know how they'll have you locked down 24 hours or 23 in one, or however it be, inside a jail or prison. They have you locked up in little rooms and stuff like that. It wasn't like that, though. At least I'm not saying it's not going to be like that, but at least that's what I felt in the dream, that it wasn't like that. Like we were almost in like an open dorm area where it was just, we were able to walk around freely and things of that nature, but we still knew that we were being held against our will, basically, so it was a form of being in prison, and like I said, the dream was just so vivid, man. It felt so real, as I was experiencing it in the dream. It felt like I was there, and like I said, they had everybody blocked off. They had the women, all of the females on their side, segregated away from the men. They was doing whatever they was doing to the women, probably was, ravaging them, raping them, doing all types of things. But they wanted the men and the women to be separate. That's what I know for a fact. So they had all the women on one side in their own little spectacle or place where they was being held captive. And they had the men, like I said, all men, doesn't matter if you was a mole or any things of that nature, you was being held over there where the men were. And they just had us divided, man. And like I said, you could definitely tell that they were waiting to kill people. And I honestly believe that these are the people that I believe didn't take that charagma, man. Because like I said, they came in the dream. From what I had the first dream, when they kicked in my door, it obviously felt like they was going after the men of the Lord first. But I think they were just going after anybody that basically didn't obey that system, man. Anybody that didn't take that charagma, man. Like I said, you probably, in the dream, it was moles, man. So I don't know if that would, I don't know. Like I said, it was just a wild dream, But what I felt in the dream, like I said, was basically the people that were being rounded up were men and women that wouldn't take in the charagma. People that wouldn't bow down to the beast, man, wouldn't bow down to Esau Edom's image and take his mark, man. And also other people, just, like I said, they were just throwing all types of people in there. But they had us separated, though, to the point where we couldn't touch each other or nothing like that. It was, like I said, it was segregation. It's almost like, that's what it was, the word I was looking for. It's almost like segregation, but it was segregation for men and women, to where men couldn't be around women and women couldn't be around men. They made it mandatory that wasn't going on in those FEMA camps. Like it was complete control. Esau Edom had everything mapped out and correlated. Everything was in order in there. But you could definitely tell, like I said, that they was killing people. That was going on. It's almost like you being on death row and the death penalty, and that's what it felt like too. It's like you ever watched that movie, The Green Mile? That's what it felt like. That movie, The Green Mile. But we weren't. Like I said, we weren't in cells though. We were able to walk around freely. We just was trapped in this room or in this big old like dormitory type space, but we wasn't able to do whatever we wanted. We were Salakia, we were able to do what we wanted, but we just couldn't, get up out of that room or whatever type place, that dormitory type setting that they had us locked up in. We just had to stay in there, and whatever we had to do, I'm not sure if it was toilets or anything in there. I didn't see things of that nature, but I just know that they had us in these certain type of clothing that's similar to what you would have if you go inside of a prison, And like I said, I can definitely tell that in the spirit they was killing people in there, but they wasn't just, killing the. It's almost like I said, it's almost like death row. You know how death row is in the prison when the guard is your execution date, right? And then they'll come get you. It's almost they was doing the same thing with the men and the women in that thing. It's like they'll call your number up, and when your number calls up, they'll bring you, and then it's either at that time like they're gonna probably test you one more time to see like, are you gonna take this mark? And if you don't take it, they kill you. That's what it felt like, Either you're gonna take this mark or we're gonna kill you, and that's what it was going on in that prison, man. So I'm gonna get a precept for that. Like I said, this is the dream the Lord gave me, you brothers and sisters. Lord's will, you was edified by this video. Like I said, it was just a dream the Lord gave me, letting me know that these times that we're the brothers, the elders, the apostles, and the men of Great Millstone been teaching about for a long time, that these times are coming, man. And we're close to it. But this is Revelation 2:10, and it says in the KJV, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil, Esau Edom, the so-called white man, shall cast some of you into prison, those FEMA camps, that ye may be tried, meaning being tested by Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, and only the faithful are gonna Salakia, only those that are faithful, that truly trust and believe in the Lord, are gonna die, because they're not gonna take that mark by any means, man. Right? So it said, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days, a period of time. And that's what I felt too in the dream. That, I don't know how many days I was in there, but I know that I can tell that, we were in there for a period of time. Like I said, I don't know if there were toilets. I don't know if they were feeding us. I don't know anything of that nature. I didn't see none of that in the dream. But all I know is that we were locked up in what you would consider, like I knew it was a FEMA camp. Like I said, I can feel in the spirit that I was definitely in a FEMA camp, or what you would call a FEMA camp. But like I said, concentration camp, basically, like what they had in World War II, like the Lord said in the book of Ecclesiastes 1:9, for there is no new thing under the sun, and history is repeating itself. So just like what, Hitler had in Germany in the 1940s during World War II, when he had those people in those concentration camps deleting them, it felt like that same type of environment. But like I said, they had us in prison clothes, and they had everybody separated. Not everybody, but like I said, they had the men on one side and the women on the other. The women couldn't contact with the men, and the men couldn't contact with the women. It was complete separation. Esau made to, he made sure, it's almost like he was trying to deprive you of everything. Because, of course, he knew if you put women and men in the same thing, what would possibly be going on and things of that nature. So it's almost like he wanted to, separate all that, basically to slave you as much as he can, because I guess that was his way of trying to torture those people, or the men that was in the camps, to try to make it seem as though you need him and things of that nature to depend upon him. So it's basically like he was trying to make you suffer as much as he can, so you will basically give up, like I said, just going back into what I said, that ye may be tried, right? Revelation 2:10, that word tried means to be tested. So that's ultimately what it's like Esau Edom was doing. He was basically making you suffer. And this is all Yahweh Bashem Yahushua is doing, but the devil was making men and women suffer so that you can take that chip. Because he know that obviously everybody is not strong mentally or not strong spiritually or mentally. So a lot of people are going to give up and eventually give in to the devil and take his chip, man, because obviously they probably don't want to suffer. They're going to probably want to be set free. And even if you was taking that chip, I still don't know if they were setting you free. Like I said, I don't know what happened to the people that took the chip. I didn't see that far into the dream. All I know is that you could definitely tell that they were deleting people in those camps that I was in. Either you took that chip or you was gonna die, man. And it's just like the Lord said in Revelation 2:10, man. And I'm gonna finish reading where I left off at. And it said, "And ye shall have tribulation 10 days, a period of time. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life." And I'm gonna read this verse again. "Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil, Esau Edom, the so-called white man, shall cast some of you into prison that ye may be tried. And ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life." So yeah, that's pretty much the dream that I had. Was a part 2 to the first dream I uploaded like a week or two ago. Like I said, it was just something quick through the spirit that the Lord, put on me to upload. So Lord's will, I pray this was edifying, until the next time I'm going to say shalom.